But before we get started, let's give a brief introduction to people who are new about what is IterateUX, why you're here. Let's a little bit introduction of ourselves, of us as who is IterateUX. So about us, we're just a community of UXers, whereas UX designers, UX researchers, writers, developers, you name it, anything involved UX involvement, user experience. Everybody's welcome. It's like a virtual community on Discord to share all the experience of different levels. We're here to help you learn, connect, grow as a career. Something we offer here at IterateUX is get your design feedback. If you need some portfolio reviews, whether it's one-on-one with our mentors or just live portfolio sessions for you to just gain some insights, the do's and don'ts of portfolio review sessions. Here we have weekly events where I like to call it virtual meetups for you to just pop in, bring our guest speakers, share their experiences, their journey, their takeaways from here for you to share, to get insight from here. That's here one of weekly events. And we also hold virtual mock-up interviews, whiteboard challenges, and design challenges for you to get experience, get foot in the door, expose to more UX user experience overall, whether you want to be a designer, writer, researcher, you name it. We're here to help you get your first UX job here at IterateUX. For our next upcoming event, where we mark your calendars, is on Thursday, 21st. One of our closest guest speakers, Cameron, he's going to share some more insights of his experience become a professional UXer from industrial professionals. So looking forward to it. Just mark your calendars. Our friendly Kim, the moderator, is going to share the links, all the social links from Facebook, Twitter, Instagram for you to check out. Give us a follow, subscribe our recordings from YouTube channel for you to see what's our next upcoming events from outside virtual meetups. And then before we begin, we'll ask all of you to mute yourself, to give respect of Minjun's time, but as well as everybody else here to everybody to listen, to ask questions, just mute yourself. Our moderators and I will go look on the chat if you have any questions. We'll collect all the questions all you have during the presentation for you to share to Minjun, as well as to help each other answer questions if you all have. Just put in the chat. And keep on engaging. Go to our Discord for any more outside of this virtual meetups, for any question and answers, any insight, any feedback, help each other get their next UX job. That's what we're here to help. We're here to build a community to help support each other on whatever career journey you are, from beginners to experienced or seniors. We're here to help each other out. We're here to build a community. And don't forget to be kind and have fun. Very excited to be today's meeting. And lastly, for us, since IterateUX is more like a non-for-profit, all of us we're expected to just give us a quick small donation, where it's just as small as $1. All the money been raised is going to provide us for you free and accessible events for you like this one. Any small donation help us with the operations like Discord, Zoom, to keep you all you provide free and accessible resources and opportunities for you to gain your experience, help you get your next UX job. And without further ado, let's get the event started. I'm so excited. Let's give a warm welcome to Minjun.
Hi, everyone. My name is Minjun, and I'm so excited to talk about this topic where I'm definitely super excited about, since I have been going through so many like different like interview as a candidate in the past. So one thing I want to talk before I share anything else is, for all of these kind of lessons, knowledge I shared in the rest of the presentation is based on my personal experience and learnings. They are not representative of my current and peers and employers. So which means it will be a very honest conversations where I share the tips, the frameworks I use to prepare for my product design interview. So it will have a lot of information. And if you find anything useful, feel free to take a note or take a screenshot. We will also have the recording share out on the YouTube as well. So yeah, let's start with the agenda today. I will firstly talk about my journey briefly, and then I will jump into the media part where I'm talk about like resume, online portfolio presentation, whiteboard design challenge, app critique, what kind of framework and strategy I'm using to prepare for this different interview session. And I think by the end of this session, we will have like 10 or 15 minutes left. And feel free to post your question on the chat. So I will review the question after I finish this presentation. So who I am. So I start my UX design journey from the University of Washington, Seattle. So right now I actually based in Vancouver right now, but I spend a lot of time in Seattle, studying and working. So I got my master's degree in human computer interaction design at UW. From there, I built up a foundation in UX design and research. And luckily, like after I graduated from the school, I landed my first job at College Y. It's a early stage startup company focusing on the education, how we can make a college application accessible to everyone. So I was like second or third designer on the team and designing the platform.
Minju, just a heads up, you can see the two screens, like current slide and the next slide.
Oh, so you can see the screen or?
We just see the two slides, like include the notes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, it's where. So let me, I didn't see the note actually. So let me start sharing and let me quickly adjust.
Yeah, I was like, I'm so sorry. I was just like,
no worry. Yeah. Let me share the desktop. So yeah. I think this can work, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
So yeah, sorry about this confusion. So I got my after graduating from UW, I start my career at College Y, and then I moved to a slightly bigger like e-commerce company like Wayfair, where I was a product designer on the warehousing team. So I was building like warehouse tool for supervisor and associate. And so it's very like B2B focus. And then after a year and a half at Wayfair, I moved back to Seattle. So I got the opportunity to working at Amazon as a UX designer. So at Amazon, like I'm working on the Prime team, which is the team designing for the Prime Day and everything around the Prime membership and benefit. So I was a designer there and focusing on like how we can design the experience to help our Prime member understand different benefits, especially some of the new benefit we just launched last year. After I stayed in Seattle for years, I moved to Vancouver, Canada, because I got my job at Microsoft, and I was currently a designer at Microsoft working on the multimedia team for the Bing search. So it's very like consumer facing, like product design team. So as you can see here, like I have so many like different experience working in a variety of different company. So during the process, I went through a lot of different like interview with like small company or the larger company. And I would like to say landing a job, especially if you are looking for your first job, is extremely difficult. Yeah, same thing for me as well. Early on, I just feel like every time I become a resume machine where I just click on the button, upload resume, and then I submit my resume. So every day I just keep applying for the company, like without actually looking at what is this company it is. So let's jump into this part about like how to prepare for the resume and online portfolio. So the biggest lessons I learned from my past experience is if you are looking for the UX designer job, definitely leverage the UX design keyword into your resume. What I mean here is if you can like quickly search some product or product designer or UX designer role across this larger company, you will find some commonality of the language they are using. For instance, a lot of companies they are using like collaborate with the PM or engineer. So in this case, you know about, okay, collaborate with the stakeholder is something they are looking for. So you need to transfer the language into your resume. So on my resume, I will say some bullet point. I will use some bullet point to say something like partner with like PM or work closely with the product owner to do blah, blah, blah. So make sure that you really looking a couple of the job position for the UX design role and highlight what is the keyword and use the keyword into your resume. So this is the biggest lessons. So after I apply this strategy into my resume, I immediately got more interview and phone call from the recruiter. And the second one is very briefly like for most of the designer, especially for junior designer, they are pretty struggling with the online portfolio, and they spend a lot of time. I write a full case study for each of the portfolio project. But based on my experience, I think online portfolio is just a way that give you the ticket into your future interview. So what they are looking for, they won't spend like so much time on reading reading the case study for like 10 or 15 minutes. The hiring manager and the recruiter, they will just quickly scan like what kind of project you have been working with, what kind of company, and what kind of product domain you have experienced before. So make sure that you really spend the time to design the homepage of your online portfolio to make sure that every like image and markup showing up on your online portfolio homepage is visually appealing, and it highlights a detail, enough detail for what kind of product you are working on. And also for every information you showing up on the screen, it should be very easy to understand. It should be concise and easier for the recruiter and hiring manager to navigate. And again, like because this is your online portfolio, make sure that you will also incorporate your uniqueness into the design of your online portfolio by incorporate your own personal branding, like personal logo or anything. Like you can just make it a little bit funny and interesting by adding your personal like brand into your online portfolio. So this is the second thing I want to highlight about the online portfolio. And then so after, if you already prepare an online portfolio and resume and you start apply for the job, I think another biggest takeaway I haven't point out here is if this is your first job, make sure that you apply as many as possible, because I do find that for my first job, applying like the quantity is better than the quality, because through we will be talking about a lot of strategy or any like tips and advice to prepare for your upcoming interview. It's better for you to really jump into the real world interview process where you can apply what you learn from this talk to your real interview and do the reflection on what is working well and what isn't working well, so you can adapt your own approach into your future job design interview. So this is how like I think it's also an iteration process. I keep refining my approach and adapt it into a different like interview stage and company. So the second thing I want to talk about is the portfolio presentation. I think a lot of designers, they don't realize how important the portfolio presentation it is, because after you get into the real interview process, every company, they will ask you for the portfolio presentation. And one of the mistake I had before was every time when I have the hiring manager call or I have a one-on-one session with the senior designer, it's about the portfolio like presentation, is about the case study walkthrough, but I didn't prepare the portfolio presentation decks. So I just share my screen and pull out my online portfolio. Like for me, it's really hard to like structure the story and craft my narrative using my online portfolio. And at the end, I will just read out whatever information I already wrote down for my online portfolio. So my first thing I want to highlight here is make sure you really prepare and design a portfolio presentation decks, which include 2 projects for the job interview. And here there is come to another question about, okay, you mean you say about like 2 or 3 projects, but how I can pick up the project for my presentation? So I think there are 2. Usually the company will require you to present and walk through 2 projects. And for the first one, I will definitely select like end-to-end larger scope, like UX design project, where I can show a broader range of my product design skill set, including user research, user interview, interaction design, visual design, and also collaboration. However, for the second or the third project, since we won't have enough time to give another full case study about the second or the third project, usually I will select something smaller than the first one to show a specific strength or superpower I want to highlight. For example, maybe for the first project, I already worked through a dashboard, like B2B dashboard with a lot of complicated flow and simplifying the workflow. However, for the second project, I might be talking about I will show some iteration on the mobile app redesign to show I'm also skilled at mobile prototyping. So in the first project, it show a range of my product design skill set, while in the second project, I will be highlight my specific superpower, which is a mobile prototyping skill. And the second thing is, again, like I mentioned, when you select when you are going to talk about the project and think about the story, make sure that there is a checklist on your mind. You need to be talk through or reflecting on by the story you're showing during the presentation, which is the hard skill and the soft skill. So every project or everything I talk about during the portfolio presentation is a reflection of my hard skill and soft skill as a product designer or UX designer. So what is the hard skill the hiring manager or the team they are looking for, which include the product thinking? It's more about have you think about the business size? What is the success metric? What is the business goal? And from the interaction design and the visual design standpoint, how did you make such design decision? Could you talk about or explain your design with the rationale? So this is the hard skill they are looking for from the project you're going to showcase. And on the other side, the soft skill, I think this is also something I learned early on is I really, as a student who just graduates from the school, I very much talking about the design, interaction design. I made a variety of the iteration. However, I always been asked the question about, have you ever worked with an engineer? Have you ever worked with the product managers on this project? If yes, how did you collaborate with these people? Or did you have any conflict and disagreement with these folks? So to make sure that when you are talk about the process, talk about the story for your project, definitely include the story of how did you collaborate with different folks, different teammates? How did you work with, communicate with these people? And the other things for the soft skill, I think they are looking for is about your self-awareness. Did you know about what thing didn't work really well on your past project? And do you know about where is your weakness or strength? And what if you are given more time on this project or resource on this project, what would you do differently? So they will ask you these kind of questions after you presenting your online portfolio, after you presenting your portfolio presentation. So again, after I talk about the portfolio presentation, the other thing I always say is storytelling is a key, because it's not a case study where we go through the human-centered design process by doing the research and showing different user flow, doing a component analysis and drawing out the storyboard. It's more about the story, how you can show yourself as a designer who can overcome the challenge through the process. That is the story. So going to the storytelling, I think when you craft the story for your case study, think about you are the hero, and through the process, we always have the challenge and obstacle we need to overcome during the process. So how how did you do as a hero, as a designer, to overcome the challenge, think about different solution, and help the team move forward in the process, and then land the result. And by crafting your own narrative, think about what kind of skill set or specific superpower or strengths I want to showcase by talking about this story. And for me, because I'm really great at interaction design as well as presentation, so I always echo these specific two strengths during my portfolio presentation to make sure that the hiring team, they know about, okay, Minjun is a well-rounded designer. She is good at she's extremely good at portfolio presentation, storytelling, and interaction design. So I will always echoes my strengths, and while showing a broader range of the product design skills through the story I talk about. And again, I always say portfolio presentation and the design process, they are definitely not a linear process. You always have the ups and downs moments. So the easier way for you to think about the story is about, I always ask me the question is, what is the most challenging part during this process? What is the most unforgettable moment during this process? So I will just write down this answer on my sticky note, and usually I will always think about maybe 3 or 4 things around this question I'm asking to myself. And these 3 or 4 things will become the main story I showcase and talk about during my process for the case study. And again, is no one else, they can design their first portfolio presentation and then they will land the job. It's always comes through a lot of iterations and practice. I always say, after you prepare your portfolio presentation, practice it with everyone or practice on your own to make sure that you are really know about what you are going to talk, and don't read the script during the process, because the interviewer, they will know you are reading the script. So definitely practice a lot before you're going into sessions. And then the other thing I find a lot of designers struggling with is this whiteboard design challenge. But again, I think even the whiteboard design challenge sounds really stressful, because usually it is an hour session and there's another designer who will become your interviewer, and they will ask you a question, give you a bigger questions, a bigger design challenge you need to walk through, you need to figure out during an hour time frame, which is very stressful. So here I want to share the framework I'm using a lot for my own online whiteboard design challenge sessions. So the first thing is definitely understand the framework for the whiteboard design challenge. And also, if you think this works really well or something else doesn't work really well, make sure that you also adapt the framework into your own framework you can leverage into your future whiteboard design challenge. So I think here is a couple steps for the whiteboard design challenge. The first one is, after the interviewer, they give you a bigger high-level design challenge, is always very broad. Make sure that you ask a lot of questions to help you define and clarify what this product it is, who is the user I'm designing for, and who is the user, and what is their pain point, as well as where is the scenario the user they are going to use this product, and why. So the why is more about why is more about the pain point, user pain point, or any business opportunity we want to reach by creating this product, or redesign this project. So make sure that you have this kind of interaction, communication with your interviewer to clarify and define what, who, where, and why before you think about any design solution. So because you understanding the user and the pain point, it's easier for us to clearly mapping out each of the key step. By doing that, it's very, I think like if you map out the key step, it's really clear for you to know about like what is next, how I can draw out a few of the critical screen based on the key step I'm mapping out before. And doing so again, like when you are mapping out each key step, definitely checking with the interviewer. So for me, like after I write down like one, blah, blah, second, I select blah, blah, three, check out, blah, blah. I always double check with my interviewer about what do you think? How do you think about this step to make sure that I can get their feedback when I was thinking aloud or when I was working on my whiteboard design challenge. So I think after you have the first and second one, it's pretty easier for us to draw out some wireframe to indicate the critical screen. And again, when you are drawing on your whiteboard, which is usually the virtual whiteboard is the Figma artboard, make sure that you think aloud and talk about why I make this design decision, why I put this like car on the top, or why I have a button here. So always talk about your thoughts, your thinking process when you are drawing out a few of the critical screen. And usually because the whiteboard design challenge is an hour long sessions, and usually I will spend like 45 minutes kind of time to go through a 1, 2, 3 step. And then in the end of the 10 or 15 minutes left, this kind of time frame, I always spend the time to summarize what is the project it is, who is the main user, and what is the key user problem I'm trying to solve. Just giving them a high level summary about the user problem, business problem, and a few of the key screen with some rationale, and talk about what if I having more time or I having more resource, like what if in this project I will be working closely with the UX researcher or other cross-functional team, what would I do differently if I give them more time and resource for my whiteboard design challenge? So in this case, you can also show your self-awareness and your knowledge about the collaboration and communication during for this real world project. So I think this is the framework I'm using. I always using this kind of framework to most likely my every whiteboard design challenge before, and feel free to adapt it into your own whiteboard design challenge framework. And the other tips I want to say is I highlighted a couple of times. Always, if you're not sure about anything, always ask the question to clarify the project context or get more background information, and always checking with you an interviewer to make sure that they align on every step, every decision you made. Because again, the whiteboard design challenge is also a two-way conversation we are going to have with the interviewer. It's not just about like I figure out the problem on my own. It's similar to the real world, real working environment where I think about draw out on the screen and I check with my PM and looking for their thought and feedback on anything I mapping out on the whiteboard. And the last thing I want to say about the whiteboard design challenge is be familiar with what kind of tool you are going to use for your whiteboard design challenge. So for me, like I'm always using the Figma because I feel very comfortable with the Figma drawing the artboard and typing on the Figma screen. But some of my friends, I see they are using like the iPad and they can mirror the iPad screen on their monitor or laptop during the interview. Or someone or some of the designer I see they prepare like physical, the real like physical like paper and write down the step on the paper, and then they can just point up in front of the camera. But for me, I'm not recommending this approach because because of the remote interview, it's probably better for us to using any like digital whiteboarding tool during these sessions. And again, like some company, they might have a specific requirement for like you should using blah blah tool during the whiteboard design challenge, and double check with your recruiter on what kind of whiteboard tool I can use for my upcoming whiteboard session. And then let's jump into another part. A lot of designers feel very stressed about is the app critique session. And every time if you hear about the app critique, usually what I'm hearing from the recruiter, they will always say, okay, don't be stressed out about the app critique. You don't have to prepare anything for this session. But based on my real world experience, I think definitely prepare a few apps in advance, such as Spotify, Yelp, Google Map, or maybe Amazon. Because usually the interviewer, they will ask you the preference on what kind of app you want to critique. So you have more control over what kind of app I'm going to critique during the app critique session. And the second thing is usually the interviewer, they want select the app, which includes your financial or personal information, such as banking app, Robinhood, or other messenger app. And also if you are interviewing with the company, that company, they want ask you to critique the app for that company. And the interviewer, they will select or ask you to select the app the interviewer they are also using in their daily life. So it's easier for the interviewer to facilitate the conversation or ask you questions during the interview. And similar to the whiteboard design challenge, I also have a framework for my app critique sessions. So let's talk about what kind of framework I'm using. And again, adapt the framework into your own frameworks, and you can always leverage into your future app critique session. So there's a couple steps. First of all, before I critique or talk about anything about around the design of this app, I always introduce the context. So what does it means here is for the context, make sure that you do your own research about what kind of user problem or business problem this app is trying to solving for. Second, what is the company mission? How the design or how overall the design of this app is aligned with the company missions. And also talk about what if we don't before the creation of this app, what kind of thing people they are going to use to maybe find a restaurant or buy the grocery. So talk about what kind the user space, business problems, and anything around the user and business side in a higher level context will help you set out a great foundation before you dive deep into any flow or design critique. And again, make sure that whenever I jump into app critique session after we select the app, I will always mention that, okay, before I jump into any specific workflow, I want to walk through, I want to talk about the user problems and what kind of business goal this app is trying to reach. So I will having a slightly agenda when I go into the app critique session with the interviewer. So after you introduce the context, this is the time for us to pick up a specific user flow. And actually between the step 1 and step 2, sometimes I will briefly talk about the home screen, the screen when after we open up the app. I will talk about the home screen briefly before I pick up a specific user flow. And when you are talking about the home screen or walk through a specific user flow, for example, search an artist on Spotify, always talk about the visual design, interaction design, and also what is the business design decision they trying to make based on this specific feature on the design, because app critique is a perfect way for them to always to evaluate your thinking process around visual design, intelligent design, and the product thinking. So everything like basically on the screen, you can talk about and you can critique like why they are using the black as a app background color, why they are using this circle other than the square shape, why this filter have following like sorting feature. So you can basically talk about every component, including color, typography, information hierarchy for the visual and intelligent design. And if you want to make more impression with the interviewer, you can talk about like why they make this kind of design decision from the business standpoint. The other thing is usually the app we are going to pick up is very mature product, such as Spotify, Yelp, or Google Map, or others mobile app. Make sure that you also think about what doesn't work really well on their design, and also prepare the question if you were the designer on this for this company, like for maybe Google Map or Spotify, how would you like to improve? Because this is the critique session, we always need to talk about like what worked really well. It's super easier for us to talk about what works really well for this kind of mobile product, but sometimes it really needs some time for us to think about what doesn't work really well for their app. So make sure that you prepare it before you go into an app critique session. And the other thing I want to say is, again, the app critique session is also a two-way conversation we are going to have with the interviewer. If you don't understand the question they ask you, make sure you ask them to clarify the question they ask you, and talk with your interviewer too. Because for me, I always like checking and looking for some sort of feedback from the interviewer. For example, like if I introduce like the high level content for this app before I jump into the criticism of the home screen or specific workflow, I always check in with the interviewer by asking the question like, do you have any question here, or I can move on into the next step. So by doing that, it can show that as a designer, you are willing to communicate or collaborate with other folks on the team. So this is a lot of information here, I know. And to summarize the overall like product design interview process, I think the biggest thing I want to highlight is definitely that every session you need the time to practice. Definitely not an easy way to do the job hunting or prepare for this job product design interview. So sometimes I will recommend you to find some like friends or peer designer where you can practice the app critique session or the whiteboard design challenge with your peer, because I find it's really helpful for me to sometimes act as a candidate, or sometimes I become the interviewer with my friend, so we can practice together for these interview sessions. And the other thing is, whenever you already have the resume, online portfolio, or the portfolio presentations, always looking for the feedback from the mentor, from the designer who already working in the industry for a couple of years. Sometimes even you can talk to some design manager to looking for their feedback or looking for their questions for your portfolio presentation, which is extremely helpful to iterate on these job application materials. And the other thing is always like the people will talk about the culture fit. And early on, I was really curious about like what is the actual like culture fit, like what is the meaning for the culture fit. And after a lot of interview, I think the best interview I did is to be myself. I'm not afraid fear of sharing my mistake I made, or what kind of struggle or the challenge obstacle I have, especially for my portfolio presentation. Because if you can add a little bit like emotion, it will add a layer of the flavor into your story. It is very like human. It is very like humans. And again, like designer, we are always very empathetic. So if you can build up this kind of emotional connection with the hiring team, you will make a huge like impressions as a candidate and make yourself stand out. And the other thing is, whenever the hiring manager or the designer or other folks ask you the question during the interview, make sure that even you prepare maybe these things in advance, make sure that after you hear their questions, pause for 1 or 2 seconds, so you can show that you really think about the question they're asking. And definitely, if you are not sure about what is the main goal for this question they just ask you, ask them the question as well. Because asking the question, asking why, is also a critical skill as a designer we leverage in our daily job. And last two things I want to highlight is, even though right now we all having this kind of virtual conversation, virtual remote interview with the team, be smile in front of your cameras and double check with your camera and audio to make sure everything is fine, is ready without any noise. Last thing I want to say, because you already spend the time practice and do a lot of like research and also a lot of like time to prepare for this job interview materials, be confident about yourself. No one else in this room or in this kind of interview session know better about the design work, know better about the project you are going to present. So thank you so much for everyone to join today's chat, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Hey everyone, on behalf of IterateUX, we would like to thank you so much for watching this week's event. If you like the content, please leave a like and subscribe. We'll have events every Thursday at 5:30 Pacific Time. Join our Discord in the description to find out more.